Hi, this is Professor Cordes, and this is the Week 6 lecture video for English 353 Children's Literature. This week, ladies and gentlemen, we need to talk about two items. One is narratology, or the study of narrative. And then the second one is the inclusion and representation of characters with special needs. Both are extremely important, and both are relevant. I don't want to drag this lecture video on because there's subsequent lectures that I've added that I'd like you to watch and review. Plus, we are starting to move in towards our final project, and I want to offer you guys time there. You don't need to sit and listen to me. You need to begin working on your projects. So with those two components, let's actually kind of start with narratology, or the study of narrative. And we talk about this during this week with our inclusion of special needs students or characters, excuse me, is because the book Wonder breaks up the chapters with a different narrator, a different perspective. And so this kind of blends things together. So first and foremost, the narrative, narratology. Looking at narratology, it is the way in which a story is told. So you can have first-person perspective with the I, me, we went, it's a very personal account of a text. When you have a first-person narrator who's involved in the story, that actually does a fantastic job of bringing in the reader. The reader feels included. The reader feels that they have that opportunity to almost mirror and mimic the protagonist, the narrator who is speaking. And so that goes well with children's literature. Okay. Whenever we read a story and we are brought into it, it gives us a different realm, or lets us experience things in a different realm than just to have an outside omniscient narrator. Now, the outside omniscient narrator is not a character in the story. They're the ones that tell us about the story that's happening. And so when you do that, children are able to perceive that they are now on the outside, and that there is they are looking in on the event. So one, for the first person, it's kind of like this inclusion. It's kind of this, I get to experience this because I'm here, versus the outside perspective in which they're watching a story happen. So both can tell a story. Both have certain ways of contributing to the characters and contributing to the plot. There's a whole dynamic, and if you are ever interested, you can take a graduate level narratology course like I did, which is overwhelming, but extremely interesting. Now, with that being said, Wonder has representation of children with special needs, as well as does that narrative form. So each chapter gives us a different perspective on the events and the characters and the situations. By doing that, it helps us bridge the gap between telling the story and telling the story well as offering a holistic representation for this group. Okay. Now, let me segue into the special education, the special needs part. When I say special ed or special needs or handicap, I am talking about a very broad group of people. That could be anywhere from mental to physical disabilities, handicaps that hinder us in any way, shape, or form. The problem is, well, there's multiple problems. The problem is that there hasn't been accurate representation in children's literature. So just like weeks ago when we talked about ethnical and racial diversity of subgroups in children's literature, it has to be the same for special needs individuals. They need real and authentic representation so that they are able to connect with the reader. Okay. If you go into a book and you're reading through a book and you have the first person perspective and there may not be a full connection piece because there's not accurate representation of that person, of that reader. Remember, half of our conversations are, what does this do for the reader? How does the reader respond? How does the reader interpret things? And so for there not to be representation of autism, Down syndrome, physical handicaps, mental handicaps within children's literature, we're doing a disservice. Okay. Now, I grew up interacting in the special ed classroom a lot. My mother was a special ed teacher. I would go into her classroom. I would watch her interact with students who were on various different levels, both mentally and physically. And her goal was always she would always try, I'm trying to make their life better. And she would say that, and what I inferred from what she was doing was, I'm trying to help them find success. I'm trying to make them feel proud of themselves, offer self-esteem, offer self-confidence. She moved up in, I don't say rank, that's not right, in the education world. She moved up to become an advocate for special ed, working at the district level, making sure that the programs in each school were sufficient and well and offered success. The problem for us, sorry, when I say us, I just mean a real world setting, is that people tend to put handicapped or disabled people on a different level. Okay, we have sympathy, we have empathy for them, but it's on a completely different level. And so for my mom and for authors and for people who incorporate special needs into the real world, we're trying to make sure that no, these kids are equal. These kids have the same opportunities. They are a genius in their own way. They can do fantastic, marvelous things that we can never imagine. And so we have to train our mindset to believe and think that these kids are equals. Okay. One of my favorite years as an educator was when I had a 9th grade class, and it was an inclusion class. And so a special ed aide came into my room, and I had 7 or 8 special needs kids, ranging from lots of things. One was in a wheelchair, one was dealing with autism, multiple things, and they were a part of the class. And we tried to make that class as normal as possible, because that was the experience that they were going for. Nothing was different or out of sync. We tried, me and the other I want to say regular students, we made it a regular class. And having that inclusion, having that camaraderie, having that representation was so important, because they began to see themselves as, I'm just like everyone else. I'm here with everyone else. And it helped change everyone else's perspective to, these are just normal kids. Right? Sure, they're in a wheelchair. Sure, they think differently. Sure, they process things differently. Don't we all? Right? Don't we all process things differently? We respond to things differently. So taking that social structure, that ideal out and placing it in. And that was a challenge for me, because I needed to make sure that there was equal representation for them in the literature that we read. So as we went through and we read through the different stories, I needed to make sure that they were represented accurately. If you look at this article right here, disability, life narrative and representation, I'm going to click on it and go over here. It's a great article that kind of outlines how disabled and handicapped individuals are presented, and what is the narrative, what is the story that is being told. The only discouraging part is that this was written in 2005. And so looking here, you have to understand that that's a long time ago. Things have changed. Things have modified. We have made significant strides in the education world, in the special ed world, in the narrative world for children's literature, in regards to children with handicaps, physical disabilities, mental disabilities. So understand that there's a lot to it. Bottom line, we need to have proper representation for these kids, okay? For them to see themselves in the literature, for them to be able to connect in one way, shape, or form, okay? One of the biggest things, I think it's over here. Back on my bookshelf. One of the biggest reasons why I fell in love with The Lightning Thief is that our protagonist, Percy Jackson, struggles with dyslexia. He has trouble reading, and he's not a good student. He has ADHD. And even though he would not be classified as a special ed student, he's a representation of a student, of a child who struggles with reading, who struggles with paying attention. I remember offering this to one of my 9th grade students, and he was like, "Oh, I don't like to read. It's hard for me to read." I mean, it was evident. But when we read through Odysseus as a class, he was really intrigued about the monsters and the mythology. So I said, "Hey, you should try out this book." And after getting through the first chapter, he was able to understand, oh my goodness, he struggles with reading. So do I. It took me forever to get through the first chapter. It's, like a week or whatever it was. But he felt like he could connect. And that's what's needed for books like Wonder, where we have a connection to, or where children have a connection to a character. And so to tell that story in whatever narrative fashion is so key and is so important. Okay. There are other videos for you guys to see. I put the movie trailer down for you. If you have not seen the movie, it's so fantastic. Get a box of Kleenex ready. How Wonder became an Oscar-nominated film. This is actually interesting because they have an interview with the author. Disabled children and their parents discussed disability representation in literature, and then top-rated children's books about disabilities. And there's a great article that I found as well that talks about stories about disabilities do not have to be sad and upsetting. There can be normalized stories of children with special needs that are just everyday. Okay. A lot of great resources for you here. As you read through Wonder, take note of how there's inclusion, how there's representation, but also how the narrative pieces it together for us. Okay. Please email me, message me if you have any questions or concerns. This is always a great topic. I love this topic. It's just such a way for us to make sure that people are represented and people are represented well. Okay. Thank you guys so much. If you have any questions or concerns, just email me. I'll talk to you guys soon.